Well, that looked like a lot of fun. What's not so much fun, though, is our reality as it pertains to our economic conditions. Now, the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy is today expected to announce this month's adjusted fuel prices as South Africans face a high cost of living and energy crisis. Now, it is anticipated that the price of petrol will be increased beyond 23 Rand a litre. Diesel expected to decrease by between 31 and 57 cents a litre. And the cost of illuminating paraffin is slated to come down by around 32 cents a litre. So the Automobile Association, that's the AA, they say that the decrease to diesel and paraffin prices is certainly good news, especially as the country enters colder months. But the increases to the petrol price will, of course, add more strain to an already stretched budget for many a South African, and consumers are advised to revise their budgets accordingly. So to talk to us more about what to expect and the cost of living for consumers, we're joined by Dawie Roodt, Chief Economist at Efficient Group. Dawie, good to have you with us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you very much and good morning to you.
So once again, consumers are expected to adjust, their budgets to what is going on. But there are barely any budgets left to adjust, Dawie.
I'm afraid, yes. And there are many studies being done at the moment suggesting that on average, the increase in wages in South Africa is currently well below the inflation rate. So that simply means that we in South Africa are getting poorer. And the main reason for that simply has to do with a lack of economic growth. You need to get the economy to grow if you want to make a dent to the levels of poverty and unemployment in South Africa, and the economy is not growing. And now what we're seeing certain prices are going up, like, for example, you just referred to the energy prices. In the case of petrol price, for example, going up. We know electricity prices went up quite steeply. And we know that very, very worrying is that food prices are also going up quite steeply. The most recent increase in food prices was in excess of 14%. So I'm afraid things are really getting very, very tough in South Africa, especially for the poor.
So when we talk about economic growth, and this, of course, Dawie, is something that we've been speaking about for the past 30 years without any great success or any real success to speak of. So we need to grow the economy. We need to create jobs. We've known this for the longest time. We don't seem to know how to do it. What should be done?
Perhaps I could just start off by giving a bit of a philosophical answer to what should be done. What are those ingredients to get your economy to grow? And as far as I'm concerned, there are three important things. The first thing is the protection of private property rights. The second one is the free trade between individuals and businesses. And the third one is sound money. Those are the three important ones. And the reason why the protection of private property rights is so important is because of the second reason, and that is free trade. Because free trade is basically a free lunch. Because it allows the buyer and the seller to trade between them, those two individuals or companies, and they both gain from that action of trade, and that creates value out of nothing. So, and the third one, of course, is sound money. That means low inflation. Those are the three important things. So do we protect private property rights in South Africa? And the answer is less and less so. So we don't protect it enough. Do we allow for free trade in South Africa? And the answer is less and less so. So we can't create those free lunches. And the third one is, do we have sound money? And the answer is certainly not, because we have high levels of inflation. And the Reserve Bank is trying to fix that. So I would argue that the reason why we don't have enough economic growth in South Africa is simply because we are following the wrong macroeconomic policies in order to get this economy to grow. And the things that we need to do is to stop threatening to steal people's stuff. We have to reduce the tax burden in the economy. We have to stop stealing from the taxpayer in South Africa. We have to get the proper working infrastructure in South Africa. We have to create an environment that is safe to do business in. Those are the kind of stuff that we need to do. In short, we need to get a government and we need to get a state that is doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I'm afraid they're not.
And, I think for most South Africans, most consumers, the immediate thought now is, how do I cope? How do I deal with these runaway cost of living increases? What can people do? Because I would imagine so many of us have already gone through trying to reduce, on our expenditure. But what more can people do, Dawie?
Yeah, I'm in financial business and I advise people all the time. And what really amazes me is that people do not know what's going on in their own finances. So a very, very important step is just to find out what's going on in your finances. So make a list of all your expenses, make a list of all your revenue sources, which mostly is in most cases just a wage income. Maybe you get some interest or whatever the case may be. But just find out what is going on. Once you find out what's going on, get the family together and get a family plan. Talk to everybody and tell them, listen, things are tough. We have to have a family plan. We have to plan ahead and then start drawing up a budget. And the budget is a living document. You have to revise your budget all the time. And of course, try to stick within your budget and include in your budget things like, for example, unforeseen expenses. Include the possibility of a further increase in interest rates, as an example, those sort of stuff. And also put some money away, if possible, for the day that you're going to retire. And of course, that budget is not always going to balance. It's becoming more and more tough in South Africa. So find out what's going on in your finances and at least have some sort of plan. Also, if you have a job, consider yourself very, very lucky. Don't demand above productivity wage increases as an example. Make sure that you keep your job if you have a job. Make sure your business where you are working survives. If you demand excessive wage increases, for example, that business that's paying your salary may go under. And we've seen many businesses going under because of an increase in wages and other costs as well. That's the kind of stuff that you need to do. And always remember, the best way of getting a well-paid job is by getting a job. So if you can find any kind of job, experience is the best that you can do to invest in yourself. And once you've got a job, even a job that pays you nothing, that will put you in a position where eventually you can find a better paid and eventually a well-paid job as well. Those are some points of advice that I would give.
And, you say that, Dawie, and I think many of us have come to that realization right now that, if you have a job, you are exceptionally privileged in this country. Looking at our unemployment stats, for example, it is really scary. But then, if you haven't had a salary increase in 3, 4, 5 years, and the cost of living is ever expanding, and those prices are just climbing around you, how do you motivate people to basically stay the course when things are that difficult?
Yes, I guess that is part of the difficult part in managing a business. I can assure you, it's not only individuals that are having a difficult time. There are many businesses in South Africa that are going through an extremely difficult time as well. Remember, when you talk about business in South Africa, it's not only the big corporates. There are many thousands of smaller businesses in South Africa that are really, really struggling. And the biggest part of being an executive, of being a businessman, is quite often is what can you do to keep on motivating your employees? You can pay them more, of course, if you can, but you can't always pay them more because your own profit margins are under pressure. And I guess that's the difference between a good manager and a not such a good manager, is how you can keep your workforce, despite financial pressures, how you can keep them motivated. But from a worker's point of view, I think it's important to understand that businesses are there, that businesses must survive first of all, because if a business does not survive, they cannot keep on employing people anymore. And please understand that as well. But you are absolutely right. I don't really have an answer to all of this. I think the problem that we have in South Africa in the end is not really financial. It's not really economic. I think the problem that we have in South Africa is politically, mostly. And that we need a government that puts the right policies in place to get the economy to grow eventually. And certainly the policies that we have in place at the moment is not conducive to economic growth. So I guess in the end, it's your and my responsibility to make sure that we have a government that really put policies in place that go to grow the economy. The current government certainly does not have those policies.
And just finally, then, Dawie, for those who do have jobs, very often also have a debt that they are servicing at this point. We look at the inflation rate that is also climbing. Marginal increase the last time, but it's an increase all the same. And then you have, of course, the Monetary Policy Committee. And I think for many people in South Africa who have debt at the moment. Lesetja Kganyago is probably one of their least favorite people when they see him at the moment. SARB trying to get the inflation, steady and to that band between 3 and 6%, where they would ideally like to see it. It is, of course, now just over 7%. But, again, the interest rates, and this is another burden for that band of South Africans who are taxpayers, who have jobs, and who are really, really buckling under the pressure at the moment.
Yes, and that's what the Reserve Bank, you're absolutely right. The Reserve Bank is trying to sort of cool down the economy. The little that we have left of the economy, the Reserve Bank is actually putting even more downward pressure on economic growth in the economy by increasing interest rates. And the reason why they do that, and I did mention sound money is one of those very important ingredients if you want to have a growing economy. Unfortunately, what the Reserve Bank is trying to do is being neutralized and even exacerbated by what is currently happening on the fiscal side. The Minister of Finance is spending far too much money. And by him spending so much money, he's actually putting petrol on this inflation fire that we have at the moment. He's actually boosting inflation, the Minister of Finance, while the Reserve Bank is trying to hold back on inflation by increasing interest rates. So we've got these two policies in South Africa: fiscal policy, which is expansionary, boosting inflation in South Africa, and at the same time we've got monetary policy, which is slightly restrictive, trying to get inflation under control. And that's an excellent example of how these two macroeconomic policies are moving in opposite directions. So perhaps what we should be doing is perhaps to get fiscal policy more in line with monetary policy in South Africa. But rising interest rates is not good for people with debt. But keep in mind that there are many people that are dependent on interest income, especially the elderly, and they are in a slightly better position today than most of the past, 20 years when interest rates were actually relatively low in South Africa.
We have to leave it there. Thanks so much for your time. Dawie Roodt, Chief Economist from the Efficient Group, talking to us about the expected adjustments to this month's fuel prices and, of course, what that means for the already stretched budgets of South African consumers. And if you'd like to tell us about your issues here in this regard, our question of the day speaks to those increases in fuel prices. So you can let us know at Morning Live SABC.